Wendy Clark will not be joining us. Heidi DeWinger,
Here.
Kylie Goslin,
Here.
Steve Kitowitz,
Here.
Leila Mastero Bruno, Lisa Tepper Bates, and Greg Ugalde.
Here.
We do
Yeah, I
have.
guess we have enough. Great. Okay, let's call.
Daylight here.
Oh, hi, Sayla. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Good. Okay, but doesn't look like we have too much. First action item is Hebron Terrace, and Debbie will present.
Good morning, everyone. I'm
Good
Debbie
morning.
Alter. I'm a manager in the multifamily area. This resolution before you is for Hebron Terrace in Willimantic. The request is for a construction permanent first mortgage in an amount up to $1,744,000 from taxable bond proceeds or another source as determined by CHFA. The note may be evidenced by one note at an interest rate of up to 4.54% for a term of 30 years. Payments will be interest only for up to 36 months as the property undergoes rehabilitation and seeks a markup to market rental subsidy increase from HUD. The loan would begin to fully amortize upon the earlier of receipt of the rental subsidy increase or 36 months from initial closing. The property is eligible, excuse me, the area is eligible for funding through the Capital Magnet Fund, and staff has been researching whether or not this would be a good fit for that program. If it is, then it's possible that the construction loan will be funded by CMF funds and then taken out by taxable bond proceeds for the permanent loan. The property is a 90 unit family property. It's in the state supported housing portfolio. It's owned by the Willimantic Housing Authority. It was built in 1952 and consists of 45 duplex style buildings. There are 62 bedroom and 33 bedroom townhouse style units, and all the units benefit from Section 8 rental subsidy. The development received a low score of 69 on its last HUD inspection. A failing score is under 60, but a score between 60 and 79 indicates several areas of concern. The low score was given due to many condition issues, including holes in walls, missing tub stoppers, inoperable windows, and there were also administrative issues cited. The property has been fairly well maintained, but many items have reached the end of their useful life. The scope of work for the rehabilitation includes roofs, chimneys, gutters, siding, windows, doors, plumbing, and site conditions. The Willimantic Housing Authority owns and manages 576 units in 8 developments. 5 of these are in the state-supported housing portfolio, and only 1 has a loan on it. All reporting is received on time from the Housing Authority, and all the properties are maintained in acceptable condition. Pioneer Builders of Newington is going to be the general contractor. They recently completed Wapping Mews in South Windsor and are currently working on Spencer Village in Manchester. QA&M Architecture is the project architect. This firm has extensive experience with CHFA, and current projects include Spencer Village in Manchester and Veterans Terrace in East Hartford. Housing Development Team is the development consultant. One of the principals, James Felnies, is involved in all aspects of this transaction, including the financing application, negotiation of contracts, and achieving the initial closing. The proposed financing structure includes the CHFA funding request of $1,744,000. It includes $2,664,000 in housing trust funds from DOH that have already received bond commission approval. There's an HTCC award of $500,000, and the property will be using $1,200,000 from its existing property reserves. The renovation will occur with residents in place. A vacant unit will be provided for families to use during the day, and they will be able to return to their unit at night. All units will be cleaned and sanitized by the general contractor before they depart for the day. Strengths of this transaction include the Section 8 contract that covers the entire development and allows the development to exclusively serve very low and low income households. The development offers 2 and 3 bedroom units with private entrances and backyards where children may play safely. And this transaction will update the condition of the property for those families. Challenges include the underwriting projections that are based on the development getting a markup to market increase in rental subsidy. And should that not happen, the development may have trouble making debt service payments. And of course, the ongoing pandemic causes challenges for rehabilitation while residents are in place, and increasing material costs can affect final construction pricing. Mitigating factors include HUD has already provided a letter of support for the renovation. HUD has been providing guidance on achieving the markup to market and has agreed to delay the next REAC inspection until the renovation is complete. Interest payments during the construction period are included in the development budget, and CHFA will also be holding an operating reserve of $200,000, which can be used should there be trouble making debt service payments. All surplus cash is deposited into reserves held by CHFA. The general contractor does have a strong COVID-19 protocol in place, and they feel that their cost estimates are solid. They had been doing the bidding probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago, so the material cost increases are already included. And as a rehabilitation of existing buildings, the need for lumber will be minimal. As we all know, lumber's costs are a huge concern right now. Are there any questions?
So I have one. Who decides of all the properties in our, the portfolio that's held, when it's time to renovate? I mean, did we precipitate it, or does the housing authority precipitate? How does it? And the score was so low. When is it deemed, it needs to get done, and who decides that?
I think in this case, it was the low score that precipitated the housing authority to seek the renovation. I'm not exactly sure how this works with the SSHP program. I know there was capital needs assessments done many years ago, and the properties were all rated. But that was a really long time ago, and those CNAs are very outdated right now. So I'm not exactly sure how they do it now, but we can certainly find out. I don't know if anyone else on the call knows more
So
about
I can add a little bit to it. In the previous administration, there were rounds, and projects or properties needed to apply through those rounds. And many times the ones that needed the most were not selected, was the one that had the best developer consultants. So when we came in, we talked to the CONARO, which is the Association for the Public Housing, and we agreed to look at projects based on need. So the asset managers made the recommendations and work with the developer or the owner to try to make sure that those properties goes through the process. So it's more right now is based on need.
Well, that had a huge reserve. I mean, $1.2 million, which means it was accumulating over some long period of time, but work didn't seem to have been done. So again, is that the housing authority just, getting around to, oh, we need new windows, we got to cost it out, or are reluctant to spend the reserve?
I think that they were waiting for, because this was in the previous rounds and they didn't qualify. So they were basically waiting to do the whole rehabilitation. Okay.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, we're trying to be a little more proactive.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. Work with asset managers to make sure that they provide the assistance that they need.
Okay.
Just one question too, and Debbie, maybe you know this, that you mentioned the other properties that are owned by this property group. And while they don't have a mortgage, CHFA is not involved. You mentioned something about the scores there. Are all these properties in the same condition, or how does that work? Because it sounded like there's a few other properties involved with these same owners.
Yeah, the housing authority owns several other developments. I did speak with the asset manager who has all of them in his portfolio, He told me they're all in relatively good condition. I don't have any information on their exact scores, but we can find that out.
This would be something considered not in good condition. Is that correct? So is it 1 out of 5, or is it?
It's hard to
considered
tell, 'cause
good?
when I read through the REAC inspection, a lot of the things were minor and really things that the management might not have control over, such as holes in walls, missing tub stoppers.
Mhm.
There were inoperable windows and things like that. A lot of it was minor, but it all added up. And the
see.
renovation is really, so a lot of those issues have been addressed since that inspection, which I think was 2017 or 18. And this renovation is to really capture the larger items like the roofs and the replacing the windows.
Okay. All right.
I'm curious, this is Kylie, I'm curious to find out, it sounds like the commissioner is moving in the direction of trying to prioritize need over an application process, which is great, because there's a lot of, in my experience, a lot of projects out there like this that are in rough shape, regardless of sort of where their REAC score might be. Has there ever been sort of a comprehensive intake of where, since these projects many of them have to go through regular inspections anyway, sort of a comprehensive plan for how to approach these in a particular order, given, level of need, and other factors? In other words, sort of like how you do a capital needs assessment and then plan out your financing around that assessment over time. Has there been any attempt by the state to do more of a sort of a whole hog assessment of where all of these are and what the true need is and prioritize them?
There was back in, I believe it was 2012, when capital needs assessments were done on most, if not all, of the portfolio. I don't have a lot of specifics as I was not involved in it back then, but I know a lot of them were assigned a year by which they should apply for funding and start their renovations, and it was rated based on condition.
Hi, this is Lisa. Can I ask an additional question? And that is, are there properties that are at a point, and not necessarily this one, but are there properties that we acknowledge might get to a point that they're simply not, it's not worth it to rehab? And instead we should be thinking about where else to invest or potentially to start over. And I have in mind the fact that some of our housing stock is likely built with building materials that are not really considered a healthy environment at this point. So there might be issues that you can't remediate for successfully, and it might be time to frankly start over. But do we look at it that way, or are we always looking to rehab?
I think we do look at what is most cost beneficial and efficient use of funding, for sure. I know there have been other properties like the ones in Hartford, Willow Creek and Westbrook Village have been demolished and rebuilt. There have been some in Bridgeport that have just been deemed not able to save, and those have been demolished and rebuilt. I think by the time it gets to CHFA for review, those decisions have already been made. The Tech Services Department will review the plan and will make comments as to whether they feel it's a good use of funding. But usually those decisions are already made.
But Debbie, you would reserve the right, staff reserves the right to go back and say, we don't believe this is worth the investment. We believe that this is a moment in time that we should perhaps consider sort of starting over.
Absolutely. And it goes the other way too. If we feel that it's in decent condition and may not need the level of rehab that they're proposing, we've made those comments as well.
Just a point to follow up with what Lisa said. It's interesting because when you do this rehab, you see that they only really need to set aside one unit, and they do one at a time, and they can move a family in during the day, move them back at night. It's just a much different concept when you have to replace. And I mean, that is needed at some point, and those are oftentimes better utilization of assets when it reaches that point. But it sounds, when you start seeing these scores and they're piecemealing together an acceptable 69 score, and now we'll renovate it this one time, but at some point you wonder when it will have to be replaced. I had the same thought.
Yeah, a 69 score doesn't sound like minor, upgrades. It just, but it's hard to tell from what we're seeing, at what level of disrepair is it in, really. Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay,
Just
is
one,
there?
one quick question. I'm sorry,
Sure.
Heidi. One
No
last
problem.
question. So this is perhaps, Nandini, a question for you. Does staff routinely go out themselves to see the property in these cases, or do we mostly rely on the records and the photos?
No, we definitely do site visits and site inspections with respect to financings that we bring forward for your consideration. So in this case, I'm assuming, Debbie, that we did visit, we visited the site with respect to this particular ask, but
Right.
asset managers are also going out to these sites on a regular basis.
Mhm.
Can you confirm that, Debbie?
Yes, yeah, that's definitely true. I didn't go in any units, but I did visit the property.
And would the asset managers get access at least inside several units by appointment?
I believe prior to the pandemic, they were definitely doing that. I think that those types of visits have been on hold, but yeah, that is
Right.
part of the process.
Okay, thank you.
It's probably important to see inside the units when we're making these decisions. I appreciate the COVID related restrictions, but that seems like it'd be an important piece of it.
Understood, noted.
Yeah, one thing I'll note here, this development, as you know, has Section 8 contracts. So HUD is also going out and independently sending contractors to do those REAC inspections. And one thing that is occurring right now is HUD is actually looking to replace the REAC standard to a new level, which is called Inspire. They have not formally rolled it out yet. They were looking at just kind of piloting it with certain owners and properties across the country. The idea is that the current REAC system is really not addressing the issues, because oftentimes a property can receive a low score, but the property overall could be in great physical condition because the inspector is only focusing on a particular issue. And then with the new standard with Inspire, the goal is to also really focus on indoor air quality and indoor issues, because oftentimes, as Deb mentioned, the owners really don't have a lot of control over how the resident is going to take care of the interior of the unit. So the idea is to not only focus on the exterior, but also on the interior issues. And that's something that I think is going to be rolled out. I don't know if it's this year or next year, but that HUD is looking at, like I said, just completely changing the standards for how they conduct the inspections.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting, this is Kylie, and that's really great to hear, Masuda, that they're overhauling that system. I think in Hartford, a lot of the controversy that happened with Barber Gardens and some of the other properties in the same neighborhood was that their REAC score, they were scoring passable REAC scores that were even higher than what we're seeing here for this property in Willimantic. But having been in those units myself, and I think the press opened up some eyes to the fact that those REAC scores either were looking at some choicer units, or they weren't really addressing some of the larger, more systemic water, mold, other issues in the property. They were citing things like broken windows and things like that, or windows that don't open properly, but that there were much bigger issues with those properties that weren't caught by the REAC inspection, or the REAC inspection score seemed very high considering the condition of the property when you went on it. So I guess I would just say I take the REAC score. It's good that they're, where you have a Section 8.5 contract, you're getting those regular REAC scores, but having seen myself that they're not, it can be dependent on what inspector, on what day, on what unit they're looking at, who's choosing the units they're inspecting, and a lot of things. I think the more we can do our due diligence, and as far as CHFA goes, is not entirely relying on those REACT scores, but really taking a look at it, then are able to make better choices, as Greg said, about whether, and Lisa, about whether the property is, what condition it's truly in as far as its sort of long-term capital needs and planning for total reno versus a rehab or total rebuild.
Yeah, and this is just a side note on the whole inspection issue, and is how many things are being weighted that are under $10. And in rentals, it can stop someone from being able to move in. Things like tub stoppers and knobs on kitchen drawers and things that can be repaired for an insignificant amount of money, and yet it'll delay someone being able to move into a property for a month. You know, and so dividing things like air quality, things that really are true health and safety from things that are easily fixable, repairable, should not do a delay or a revisit. It would be great if they started to really separate the things that matter most.
Didn't you
Okay,
also, didn't you
Go ahead.
also say that there were some administrative issues too? Did that affect that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I was told, was that there were some
Yeah.
administrative issues that
Yeah.
played into the score as well.
Mhm.
And what could those be? What,
Files being maintained improperly, things like that.
okay. Anybody else? Any other questions, comments?
Well, this is Kylie, just wondering if there's
Sure.
any plans or expectations for addressing those administrative issues. If this is going to be the same owner. So is there any plan or sort of protocol that CHFA puts in place where we cite administrative issues to either provide a plan and some sort of regular check-in to determine whether those are being addressed?
My understanding is those were taken care of. But again, I'm not in the asset management department. I can find out for you.
And is there any,
With the Section 8 contract, so if there are administrative issues when they're conducting that management occupancy review, HUD would be going back out. So in this case, it would be a contractor for HUD that would be going out the following year and doing another management and occupancy review just to make sure that those deficiencies in the files were addressed.
Thank you, Masuda. And since this original REACT was, I believe it was 2017 or 18, so those issues must have been cleared up by now.
okay, is there anybody else? Any other comments? Okay, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve this application as submitted.
Second,
Okay, Shelley, you want to call the roll?
Yes. Cindy Butts,
Yes.
Heidi Dewinger,
Yes,
Kylie Goslin,
Yes.
Steve Kitowitz,
yes.
Salem Mascara Bruno,
Yes.
Lisa Tepper Bates,
Yes,
Greg Ugaldi,
Yes.
unanimous.
thank you. Okay, next on the agenda, I have the minutes from our last mortgage committee meeting. I don't know if there's any comments, changes. They look fine to me.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thanks, Greg. Is there a second?
This is Kylie, I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Shelley.
Cindy Butts,
Yes.
Heidi Dewinger,
Yes,
Kylie Goslin,
Yes.
Steve Kitowitz,
I abstain.
Salem Mascara Bruno,
Yes.
Tepper Bates,
yes,
Greg Ugaldi,
Yes.
one abstention.
okay, thank you. All right, reports. I guess we have an update on the Cherry Street Loft project. Michelle?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Michelle Norfer. I'm one of the managers in the multifamily department. So last November, when this committee and the full board approved our recommendation for a 12-month extension to the Cherry Street Lofts financing, we were asked at that time to provide the mortgage committee with a 6-month update. And time certainly flies because here we are 6 months later already.
Crazy.
But as you may recall, the plan was to give the developer a year. And in that year, they were going to get the project fully complete, up and running and refinanced with Fannie Mae, with Citibank being the delegated underwriter, which would ultimately take out our financing. So this morning, I'm just going to give you a brief update of the progress that's been made in the last 6 months. So with regard to marketing and leasing is great. The project is complete. It's fully occupied. Turnover is very low. Traffic is still strong, and they maintain a wait list. So on that front, things are going great. With regard to capital contributions, the benchmarks that the developer needs to meet to obtain those equity contributions in March, they did meet the milestone necessary to receive their 5th equity installment, and that installment was a little over $10.5 million. 4.7 of that came to CHFA, and it was used to pay down our construction loan. So that was good news. A significant amount of the remaining equity, though, is coming from federal and state historic tax credits. The federal Part 3 application has been filed, and what that is that's the approval of the completed rehab. That's still pending. However, since I authored this memo, there has been some progress that is made to date between the developer's historic consultant and the National Park Service. So just to give you an idea of what the main issue is here and why the application is still pending is because the developers used some acoustical tile to conceal some mechanicals in the Railroad Avenue building. They covered like cameras and lightings and piping and such. And the historic agency wants that tile removed. So a proposal to remove the tile in the elevator lobbies as well as in some of the stair wells was submitted to NPS. Now we're waiting to hear if that proposal is acceptable. Once it is accepted, that work can be done, and I'm being told the work is minimal. It would only take a couple of days, and it's really not going to impact costs. The costs are minimal to remove these tiles as well. Once that happens, then the historic consultant will submit the Part 4 and the Part 5 to the SHPO, the State Preservation Office. So we're hoping to hear back on that proposal shortly within the next couple of weeks. They do have 30 days to respond, but everyone is aware that, you know, this is the timing of this and how we need this expedited. So they've been NPS, the gentleman from NPS has been extremely reasonable, and we're hoping to get some information back from them shortly. Now, with regard to the application with Fannie Mae and Citibank for the takeout financing, the numbers are still moving. Since the last time I reported to you all, there has been some increases in the budget since last November. You know, increases due to additional general conditions because of some construction delays. There are increased soft costs, interest costs, especially because we thought that they'd be closing sooner than anticipated. And then on the source side, the tax accountants are still working to determine, you know, the final tax credit equity amount based on the limited partnership agreement. You know, as you know, there's adjusters in that agreement, and whether or not, you know, some of these cost overruns, which ones could be counted in eligible basis and which ones cannot be. But with that said, Citi is still working on a revised underwriting. We do know that they underwrite at a 1.15 debt service coverage ratio. And since we do have a $5 million FAF loan on this project as well, in addition to our money, there's a financing adjustment factor loan on this project in the amount of $5 million. That loan requires hard payments beginning in 2036. And Citi is having difficulty getting to their 1.15 requirement because of this loan. So I have been approached and asked if we would consider making concessions to that loan. But at this point in time, I can't make that recommendation until I have more, you know, hard numbers, better numbers, and I don't have that right now. I'm expecting to see Citi's underwrite within the next couple of weeks. But we did just want to I want you as the committee to be made aware of that if we do agree or would like to recommend any modification to that FAF loan, it would require board approval. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. And just so you know, that the terms of that loan annual principal payments were based on 50% of cash flow when this deal was underwritten. And that payment beginning in 2036 is $170,000. That payment would increase annually, assuming, you know, cash flow would increase. So that payment increases annually and goes out to 2049. And at that point, all principal payments would become due. So cities including that in their underwrite, and it's impacting their debt service coverage requirement. So that's where we are with regard to the takeout financing. But I did visit the site recently because I hadn't been there obviously through COVID. It really looks great. It's being well kept. It was quiet. And I did get to see the areas that NPC would like change. So I got to see that for my own eyes, with my own eyes. And the developers are pretty confident, very confident that they are going to be able to take us out in the time period that they need to, which is the end of this year. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Well, it sounds though it is, if we don't modify or grant some concessions on the FAF repayment schedule, that the Citibank's not going to get to the number they need. So it does sound like we have to do something, or we won't get the takeout financing. Is that
right?
true?
And that's true. And I think what they came out and asked for, just cash flow loan based on 75% of cash flow. Well, I can't recommend that. Maybe it's a different structure, because we need to see the numbers first. But yes, you're right. I don't think we'd want to derail this whole refinancing by being, strict with that FAF loan.
Stubborn. Yeah. Okay. So there's a deal here. It's just a question.
Yeah, there's a deal here. We just need to figure out, which way to go. I mean, I think we know which way to go. It's just a matter of how do we restructure that FAF loan so that it, doesn't derail the deal and keeps city and CHFA happy.
Do we have any input as to how the projections are calculated? Because I mean, city could, increase all the expenses, 10% versus a normal 3%. I mean,
exactly, and that's what I want to see. To be honest with you, I want to see what are they doing.
Right. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you, Michelle.
You're welcome.
Okay, Wendy, multifamily.
Good morning, everybody. So just a quick update on some of the other activities that have been going on in multifamily. We have applications for the Housing Tax Credit Contribution Funds, better known as HTCCs. Those are due on June 1st, which is next week. So at that time, multifamily staff will be very busy starting their review on those applications. We had 3 initial closings that took place in April. Just to note, one of those was for Barnum House, which had just been approved by the board in February. So that one was pretty quick to close. There were no final closings for the month. At the beginning of May, we had some multifamily staff that attended a multi-day public housing manager certification training that was mainly focused on the management of public housing. On May 11th, the NEMA, which is the New England Affordable Housing Management Association, held their annual agency conference. It was remote again this year. We had staff from CHFA, HUD, and Navigate Affordable Housing, which is the PBCA in Connecticut, all gave updates on what's going on at their respective agencies. Most of the audience there is management agents. So we had a lot of management agents from some of our CHFA financed properties in attendance. Just a little preview of next month, we have multifamily staff members that will be attending a 2-day C3P tax credit training. This is a training that Spectrum puts on. And they offer some slots to our staff since we contract with them for our compliance work. Also next month, NCSHA is holding their annual Housing Credit Connect Conference. It'll be virtually again, but we will have staff participating in that conference as well. The topics are in the memo, but they include compliance monitoring, construction, COVID-19, still a hot topic, data and analytics, and others. We've mentioned the HACCP program for several months now. There's still $18,000 available. That was to fund that basic needs pantry, and that funding is available to housing authorities in the state portfolio. The draft 2022 and 2023 QAP was out for public comment, as you all probably recall. We had a public hearing on May 19th. There were about 20 people on the call, and Terry is also receiving written comments. And then at the end of the report, we've also included a preview of some of the applications that are currently under review in multifamily, and will be where we expect to present those to the board in the upcoming months. So do you have any questions?
Thank you, Wendy.
You're welcome.
Well, that's all I have for the agenda. So I guess we could get a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you. See you in a few minutes.
Okay.
You.
Okay.